Hey everyone! Have you ever thought about how amazing ancient Egypt was? It's one of the coolest and most interesting civilizations in history, lasting for thousands of years and leaving behind amazing monuments and stories. From the giant pyramids to their everyday lives, ancient Egypt was all about celebrating life, even though some people think they were focused on death. The truth is, ancient Egyptians loved life. They built tombs and made mummies, not because they were obsessed with dying, but because they believed life continued after death in a new form. To them, death was just a step into forever. Their tombs and temples were made to keep the joy of life going for eternity. Egyptians also loved their land, believing there was no better place on earth to live. Even the poorest people found ways to appreciate their lives. They had a ritual called the Five Gifts of Hathor, where they looked at the fingers on their left hand and thought about 5 things they were thankful for. Being grateful was super important to them, helping them stay positive and happy. Religion was a big part of their daily lives. Egyptians believed their gods had already made the world a place of order, and it was their job to honor them and keep the balance. They told stories about creation, saying everything started from swirling chaos. The god Atum stood on a small hill and used magical power, called Heka, to create the world. Magic wasn't just for wizards or fairy tales, it was the energy behind everything in their world. Their ideas about the soul were pretty detailed too. They believed the soul had many parts, like the physical body, a double form called Ka, and the Ba, which could fly between earth and heaven. They also had the shadow self, Shuye, and a secret name, Ren, that was kept hidden for protection. Preparing for the afterlife was a big deal, and mummification was a way to preserve the body so the soul could live on forever. But ancient Egypt wasn't just about religion and the afterlife. They were inventors and creators who made things we still use today. They came up with toothpaste, toothbrushes, and even breath mints to stay clean and fresh. They also created surgical tools, cosmetics, wigs, and hairbrushes. They were amazing builders, using math to construct pyramids and temples with incredible accuracy. They even had clocks and calendars to keep track of time. Some people think they might have understood electricity, but that idea isn't widely accepted. Everyday life in ancient Egypt was a lot like ours in some ways. People lived in simple homes, raised families, and had fun with games like bowling. What made them different was their deep connection to their land. They believed Egypt was the only place where their souls could be reborn, so they made sure their bodies would come back if they died far away. They thought their afterlife would look just like the world they knew, with the same trees, streams, and homes they loved. This belief helped them appreciate their surroundings and live peacefully, guided by the idea of Ma'at, which means balance and harmony. Ancient Egyptian culture wasn't just about pyramids and kings. It was about loving life, being grateful, and finding balance. And now let's talk about the differences in how people lived based on their social class. In ancient Egypt, the way you lived depended a lot on your social standing. For example, homes for the lower classes were simple structures made from mud bricks baked in the sun. The thickness of these walls showed how wealthy the family was. Richer families could afford double or even triple layers of brick, while poorer families made do with a single layer. Wood was rare and expensive, so it was only used for things like door frames and windowsills in wealthier homes. Roofs often doubled as living spaces because the interiors were usually dimly lit, making them perfect for evening gatherings. Clothing was practical and mostly made of linen. Men wore knee-length skirts or loincloths, and women wore light dresses or robes. The style of these clothes often reflected their social status. For instance, wealthy women might fully cover themselves, while servants or entertainers were often depicted with little or no clothing. However, in Egyptian culture, a woman's choice of clothing wasn't seen as immodest or provocative. It was simply a matter of personal preference. The goddess Isis was believed to have granted equal rights to men and women, and this equality extended to fashion. Children, on the other hand, often didn't wear clothing until they reached puberty. Marriages among the lower classes were informal and straightforward. A man would bring gifts to the house of his intended bride, and if the family accepted, the couple began living together. Marriage contracts ensured that a husband's assets were divided fairly among his wife and children, and these agreements could only be dissolved in cases of adultery. Women in Egypt had more rights than in many other ancient civilizations. They could own land, run businesses, and even serve as priests or doctors, though these roles were less common due to the expense of education. Despite this, Egyptian society placed a high value on family life and mutual respect within the household. For children, life was divided by gender from an early age. Boys started learning their father's trade, or went to school around the age of 4 or 5, while girls stayed with their mothers to learn how to manage a household. Though unusual, some women did pursue education and careers as scribes or priests. The upper classes, on the other hand, lived in more luxurious homes and enjoyed greater material wealth. Even so, their daily activities weren't vastly different from those of the lower classes. Everyone enjoyed games like Senet, though wealthier families might have more ornate game boards. Sports and outdoor activities were also popular. Nobles often went hunting or sailing, while others enjoyed wrestling, archery, and races. Swimming and rowing were loved by everyone and played a big part in Egyptian leisure time. The Nile River was central to many of these activities. One particularly thrilling sport involved small boats, where teams tried to knock each other into the water in a game of water jousting. Gardens were another source of joy for Egyptians of all classes. While gardens provided food, they also gave people a chance to create something beautiful and personal. For those who worked in the fields all day, tending a home garden brought a sense of pride and connection to the land. This connection went beyond daily life. Egyptians believed their land would be their eternal home after death. Tomb inscriptions often spoke of a desire to walk by the water or rest under the shade of a tree in the afterlife, reflecting how deeply tied their beliefs were to their everyday surroundings. In many ways, life in ancient Egypt was about balance, between work and leisure, between the spiritual and the practical.